Hello, my name's Steve Seven. I'm the author of this Spiritual Alchemy book, and as it states here in the subtitle, this is a practical manual for self-initiation into the Western mystery tradition. I want to read a little bit of introduction from this book and explain a little bit clearer what spiritual alchemy is all about. So I'll start with the blurb on the back and then a couple of pages of introduction. Okay, at Spiritual Instinct Press, we believe that the instinct for personal development is the central pivot around which all other instincts turn. It can also be seen as the main motivating factor in higher human behavior, and it informs and colors the development of the world's religious and philosophical traditions. The transformation process is the central tenet of, for example, both Christianity and alchemy. It is a little known fact that some of the most influential theologians, such as St. Thomas Aquinas, as well as other Christian intellectuals such as Sir Isaac Newton and Leonardo da Vinci, were practicing alchemists. Now there are 27 references in the New Testament to the mystery element of Christianity. But despite this firm attestation from the texts themselves, the esoteric level of Christianity has been largely ignored and sometimes actively discouraged by the Church. Now this prejudice has been to the detriment of the collective and individual spiritual growth within Christendom. This booklet is a comprehensive introduction to the mystery element of the Bible, which finds a strong correspondence to the symbolism and processes of spiritual alchemy. Okay, now the history of alchemy is intimately tied to that of chemistry, and many conventional scientific terms and operations came from the art. In the current context, however, the focus is specifically on the psychological processes which are represented by these material symbols. There is no attempt here to turn lead into gold, but rather it is a roadmap for self-realization and transformation. This is also called salvation or wholeness or enlightenment. Now, as an arcane art, alchemy evolved in secret, and there was never a uniform exposition from the various schools that had a hand in its development. Much of this confusion was a deliberate strategy by the adepts to keep the mystery element intact. The present work is a modern rendering of some of the classic symbols and principles into a unique working model for use by the contemporary magical practitioner. No apology is given if the system appears pared down when compared to other elaborate schema. The important point is that it works. Now, our inner odyssey is called for good reason the hero's journey. Here we find our authentic soul below the layers of cultural conditioning. The monsters and the sirens we meet along the way are attempts from our ego to stifle our growth through fear and complacency. Now, it is important to note that because the system focuses on the psychological elements of the transformation process, this does not mean that the entire project is reduced to a merely biological or neurological level, nor that there is no room for the individual soul. The word psychology comes from the Greek psyche, and this means not only mind, but also life energy or soul, and it is with this extra depth that the word is used here. It is typical Western dualism to separate spirit and matter, or mind and body, but this is a mistake. The soul is the meeting place of the universal spirit with the material plane. The physical aspects of human beings stand together with the deeper spiritual features of our nature, and they are treated here as being interconnected. The spiritual dimension is not brought down to the level of reductionist clinical science. The boundaries of psychology have been elevated to include many of the most profound transpersonal experiences. This can be seen as establishing a material basis within which the non-material element can be nourished and therefore flourish. A question mark is left over many of the transpersonal dynamics of the process, and it is left up to the individual seeker to find their own answer. Now, as far as the mechanics, if you like, of spiritual alchemy, we are very dependent on a concept known as the archetype. And this book here is my second book. The idea of the archetype is a comprehensive history and exposition of this concept from its early beginnings, or known beginnings, in the classical philosophers such as Plato's ideas or forms, all the way up to modern psychology. And it's used in many more contexts in modern psychology than with Carl Jung and analytical psychology, with which it has become synonymous. And I go into great detail about the other systems they are using the same concept of the archetype in modern psychology, the other schools. The archetype basically could be called a spiritual instinct, which is, of course, where the name of my press house, Spiritual Instinct Press, comes from. And they could be described as transpersonal pockets of consciousness, sort of quantum energy that is written into the laws of nature. In fact, the first domino of spiritual alchemy is that nature is a blessing, and everything is for a purpose. Everything is interrelated, interconnected, and becoming what the early rabbinic mystics described as, in the same way that we speak of evolution, except not just in the material sense, but also in the spiritual sense. And the archetypes are helping us. They are like in the same way that our DNA dictates how tall we're going to be, what color our eyes or hair will be. The archetypes can be seen as part of the structure of the DNA of creation in the first instance. And there are archetypes that are for creation, such as truth or justice. But there are also personal archetypes. And the center, again, is the archetype for personal transformation. And this is, in the end, towards the constellation of your higher self, the soul that you were born with. From the beginning of time, your soul was created. And when you were born, it's like a spiritual DNA that, if you listen to it, will guide you into self-realization, which is, in the end, autonomy. And in spiritual alchemy, the result or the end goal that we are seeking is autonomy in our life, so that we are choosing our own decisions and they are not being chosen for us. And if you think that it is exaggerating to say that one needs a rigid system to find your authentic self under the layers of accretionism of social programming, then it will do well to remember that the effect of socialization actually forms the material structure of our brain. So in a very large way, our being in this world is programmed into us. And if you look deeper at every philosophy and every religious system that we know, the goal is to get underneath and to know yourself. As it's stated in the Delphic Oracle, over the threshold, know yourself and know that you are a God. Of course, this means that spiritual alchemy is a very practical system. And there are many, many further dominoes that fall automatically from the first domino, that creation is a blessing and that everything is interconnected. Like I've said, it is a false duality to say that mind and body, or the spiritual world and the material world, are not interconnected. And no mystic would agree with that. And if you look at some of the great mystics like Hildegard of Bingen or St. Francis of Assisi, their worldview was very closely entwined with the connection between the material world that we're living in, that we see as our reality around us day to day, and the spiritual world that can become more and more of a reality being brought into our lives. In other words, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so in spiritual alchemy we are interested in healing herbs, and we are interested in meditation and depth psychology and the archetypes. And I invite you to come on a journey with me and learn these different aspects of spiritual alchemy. Thank you very much.